Make sure they can see.
Oh, Danielle, what's up?
Okay, here's group 4. Go ahead when you're ready.
We're the preservers of the future. We look into the past for a better future.
Is it not clicking? Try now. There you go.
Shoot, I thought I'd start off with what is genocide. If we're going to debate if this is a genocide, we've got to first know what it is. The deliberate killing of stealing a national, ethnic, culture, or religious group. So, you guys all know the most famous genocide, or the Holocaust. So, yeah, that's it.
So I'm going to start off with a little bit of what happened before this genocide started. The Ottoman Empire had taken over Armenia, and they had become part of the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottomans were Muslim, the Armenians are Christian, and the Ottomans were worried about them betraying them and stuff, so they ended up giving them fewer rights and privileges. But even with that, the Armenians were still richer and higher educated than the Turks. And so when the war approached, they saw it as an opportunity basically to take out as much of Armenia as they could. They started by recruiting Armenian soldiers to work on the railroads, and then as soon as that was done, they would kill the soldiers. And some of the first-hand accounts from women, because that was mainly who survived. I don't know how to pronounce these, but René Monkokian, she was very young when this happens, and she was marched with her family to an armament where the soldiers learned that, Turkish soldiers learned that the Russians were coming, and so they told them, just pretty much sarcastically, that anyone who wants will take them to the Russians, but they just ended up lining them up and shot everyone. Her nose, something happened to her nose, and she broke her hand from being shot, and another boy who survived, found her, and they walked until they met up with the Russians, and then she stayed with the Russians the rest of the time. The other one is a little shorter, Veronica Brugarian. She watched her grandfather, the priest, get beheaded, and just a few days before, they had learned that the soldiers on the railroad had all been killed. And after he was beheaded, the Turks played soccer with his head, which shows how little they respected or even cared about the worth of the Armenian lives.
So, how would you feel if your family was marched out of your house? And then how would you feel if you were told to walk across a desert until you died? And how would you feel if you were a victim of a deliberate massacre?
Thank you. Sure, I'll give an overall view of what actually happened. So the Ottoman Empire, which is now modern-day Turkey, they got very cautious of the minority, I guess the Armenians, for coming and stabbing them in the back. They were friends with the sleeping giant, or Russia. The Ottomans were worried about the Armenians fighting them, so they drafted all Armenian men, so the ones that could fight basically, either worked them to death or shot them in the back of the head. And they rounded up all the women and children and marched them to the Syrian desert. And to kill mass amounts, they'd put them into a cave and light a fire, and they'd suffocate to death. And also, may I add, a lot of the other groups that are saying don't call it a genocide, or, think about the little kids, do you think they're wanting to go kill the Turkish people? I mean, they're children, so I guess that's just the way about that.
The scale here was more than anyone could count on. Now, in addition to the great scale and the great dome, what you see in Hagia Sophia.
There's a close button. That's not the one you wanted.
No,
Okay.
it is.
I messed something up.
The scale here was more than anyone could count on. Now, in addition to the great scale and the great dome, what you see in Hagia Sophia is openness. Openness is part of this, the aesthetic effect of the interior of the building. Rather than supporting the dome or the vaulting of the building on solid walls, they're supporting it on piers. That is, leaving the walls open with just piers, basically 12 great piers around the building, between which everything is opened up into windows. So there's a skeletal structure there. It gives a building a lightness and allows the natural daylight to come in at all levels in the building.
I have to say, Bob, that the miracle you said is the miracle of the beauty of the building is that
It's about architecture. If Paige says that, it may be my problem.
It was very interesting.
Yeah. There might have been an issue with it, but I don't think that's what you wanted.
No.
Can someone just explain brief terms what that was supposed to be?
So the video just talked about like how they made a march and everything. It just kind of went into detail more on what Gary just talked about and explained how they did all the killing and what they did with the men and with all the women and everything, the kids, and then it just kind of asked, like I said before, and how you would feel as well about it.
And now people might think, like, what can we do now? It's been this long, why say something now? And if we recognize the past, then we can preserve the future. If we teach people about what happened to the Armenians, then we can prevent such a man-made disaster from happening again. And to preserve the future, we need to educate people about the past. If we simply call what happened to the Armenians an accident, then what will stop others from making a simple accident again? To stop these mass murders, we need to call them what they are. We need to recognize that these are not accidents and are in full intention of eliminating the Armenian race. This is called genocide.
Okay, questions for group 4. Mr. Phelps, could you hit the left light switch for us, please? You can keep the mic with you. Any questions for these guys?
Yeah.
My question, it seems like the only thing that people are getting mad about is that the president is saying it on an address once a year, or hasn't said it. And we're talking about whether he's gonna say it or not say it, right, on the 24th? But it's already in a legal document, our House Resolution 106, we already call it a genocide. So, right, isn't that what that says right there?
So you're voting at the end. Do you want to do that? We haven't yet.
So that's an amendment to a resolution, right? So what's the original resolution say?
The last group is going to tell us what the amendment is.
Okay, then I'll wait.
Any other questions?
Chill out. He's just getting ahead of us. That's okay.
Go ahead, man.
I'm sorry, but the whole like they kind of like
Listen.
in your whole society thing and the name of your guys' group. How do you preserve something that hasn't happened yet?
Well, if we educate people, then we can stop it from happening again.
Because what we do now affects what we do in the future, I suppose.
Any other questions for Team 4?
Yeah.
One last one.
Trying to convince Turkey to say it's genocide. Why are you so worried about America?
Because they're all a bunch of stubborn Muslims.
So then this doesn't really matter.
Alright, we're done.
It should be a live presentation.